So I imagine that VE Day must have been quite a good celebration.
Oh, yes.
Sure.
To think there was going to be no more bombs and trouble. Although when you're young, I suppose the older ones thought like that, but when you're young, it seems silly to say it, but it's like an adventure. Well, I was only, when war ended, I was only 13. I just remember that there were tea parties and somebody brought a piano out. I remember that.
Oh.
But I remember that they, in a hall, a church hall, in a road near where we lived, they had a dance, and I remember, I was only 13, as I say, but I was longing to join in, and I didn't know how to dance. My grandmother didn't believe in it and had never let me learn, and so there I was, just looking through the window at the people, dancing around and wishing that I was in there doing it. Oh, Peter, my husband, he just said he remembered his father organising all the flags and decorating the street. I think they did. They used to have, from what I can remember, they put one end of the flags. They were those little pendant, do they call them? Or pennant flags. They had one end in the one window and shut it down to keep it firm. And then they put it right across the road, and the person opposite put it through their window and shut the window down, so that, it served as somewhere to hang the flag. Peter said his father hung them up properly. Oh, dear.
I suppose at the beginning, we lived on a nice drive, and people were very, very friendly with each other. It was very neighbourly where we lived. And obviously, during the war, most of the women were out working, doing various things, some for the war. And that was my mother was out. Father was in the Chindits in Burma. And on VE Day, obviously there was huge celebrations. And they started to organise the street parties. And of course we were a tremendously long drive, and it was quite a feat to see all the trestles down the street, and all the women sort of baking and cooking for the food.
Yeah.
And of course, on VE Day, not because my father was the Chindits, one of the things that didn't happen for us was that he didn't come home, because he was in Japan. He came later on VJ Day. So a lot of people did come home, were home. A lot of the people, of course, were, depending on where they were, didn't come home. So there were some with fathers, some without. Well, there was a lot of music, there was a lot of singing, and there was a lot of dancing, and there was a lot of eating. We had, on our drive during the war, we had these large concrete shelters had been built for safety, because they were still there. And so there were people on the top of those. We got all sorts of things, climbing up on the shelters, and generally it was a sort of a bewildering day for youngsters, that all of a sudden this was happening. And I suppose that initially, apart from being told it was the end of the war, we didn't really appreciate it.
Well, basically it was started in the very early hours
there was people started to go around the street or the lane and tapping on windows, and eventually you virtually got someone from every household, and there was a march right along the lane, down to an avenue, round the avenue and back again, all celebrating. And when I got to the avenue, there was a march coming from the village itself up that way. I vaguely remember getting back to bed in the very early hours, only to find Dad was just about getting up to get ready to go to work at the pit. From then onwards, it seemed to snowball. We didn't go to school. And then there were celebrations on and off of one form or another for, 2 or 3 days, really. There was a huge kids' party. Where they got the stuff from, goodness only knows, but there was trestle tables along the lane, and all the kids were sat around having something to eat, and having a good laugh. It was really very strange in some respects, thinking back, but at times it seemed a bit unreal. But then you go back indoors and put the radio on and hear about the fighting in Japan, which tended to, put a damper on things.
Yeah.
Just at that time, there was talk about the lads coming back in the mob suits. And there's a lot of ridicule about the fit of the mob suits and all that sort of business. And so there was going to be this huge street party and a fancy dress parade. My mother called me over one day, said, "Do you want to go in?" I said, "No, thanks." She said, "Go on, be a sport, do something for me." So she got a pair of Dad's trousers and a jacket, tied them up with string or pinned them up, and it was put that the truly hat on me and a big pair of boots, and later on just demobbed and stuck me in the fancy dress parade. A bit embarrassed, but I won the blessed thing.
VE Day, yes, I can remember VE Day that I got my friend who was in the RAF, Jeff Coling. Do you remember Jeff Coling? And he was home on leave, and he'd been in RAF missions, over Germany, etc. And I think we got paralytic drunk. And I can remember coming home being absolutely sick, and I can remember that I couldn't get to the toilet in time, and my mother, I was living with my mother then, and I got to the window and I killed all our anthuriums in the garden. Absolutely sick. So there we are.
I can't remember much of it. I think I was still abroad.
Okay.
I know there was big occasions, but we had all I can remember about VE Day was we had a little bit of celebration. But what they were worried about, the war in Burma was still going on.
Yes.
It was just an ordinary occasion.
Well, anyhow, I wasn't here on VE Day. I was out in the Far East. I was on leave at the time with a friend. We were down in Tasmania off the coast of Australia. And the word came that the war in Europe was finished. So we were asked to march in front of the congregation behind a pipe band. That was fantastic. And that was my memory of the end of the war in Europe, because it meant nothing to us, because we were against the Japanese, and we could see them going on for another 3 years at least, But then suddenly, of course, the 2 bombs dropped, Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and it was all over. When we came back to England, some months afterwards, we landed at Southampton after 5 years of war, and there was no one to greet us, no one to say, Well done, boys, because we were the forgotten army out there, just like the 14th Army in Burma. But we didn't worry about it. We were alive, and that was it.
VE Day, we'd come back from France, and I was at the pool, getting ready to go to the Far East on the small boats, little support craft. That was a special boat squadron down there, and we were waiting, and we went out to Pacific, and the war was still in there, of course, and I'm not sure really. It was the 15th of August, the end of the Pacific War. We was actually then in Australia.
Right.
So we hung about in Australia, and I ended up on the aircraft carrier Formidable, and came back to this country from Sydney in January 1946.
Right.
But otherwise, it was just training in between.
Well, I was serving on a French ship as liaison staff, and I was in Toulon. And I went ashore, and the turd had gone mad. And being a British sailor in this French port, everybody was coming up and giving me wine. And I'd never been kissed so much in all my life with all the French girls. And I got in such a bad state, I went back to go aboard the ship, and I must have fell on a railway line in the dockyard, because a couple of the French matelots off the ship picked me up off the railway line and took me back aboard the ship and put me in my hammock. And I got in my hammock, and I was as sick as a dog. And that was my day.
I was having an operation that day, and the cleaner went up to the surgeon and said he was a wicked man to let us have our operations on the Victory Day. When we came round at night, it was all the bands and the singing, and terrific noise. So everybody in the ward, they came round and gave everybody in the ward an injection to put them to sleep.